Hi, welcome to Beyond Politics. I'm Catherine Clark. Ontario Liberal MP Ted Hsu earned a PhD in physics from Princeton before going into the financial sector and working for a major global firm. At the height of his career, he took 3 years off to be a stay-at-home dad, and now Ted Hsu has undertaken another career change. He is the MP for Kingston and the Islands. Ted Hsu joins me now in Ottawa to talk all about his life beyond politics. Ted Hsu, welcome to Beyond Politics. It's really great to have you here.
Oh, good to be here.
You know, you were born, I learned, and correct me if I'm wrong, in Oklahoma.
That's right.
Is that right?
Yeah, my dad was working in the oil patch. He's a chemical engineer.
Okay. I was wondering how you ended up in Oklahoma. Born in Oklahoma to Chinese parents who then moved to Canada.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, when I was just a little 6-month-old baby, my dad moved to Kingston to take a position at Queen's University. So that's really where I grew up.
Right, and that's the writing. I mean, you currently represent Kingston.
That's
so.
Right.
How did your parents meet? Did they meet at home, or did they meet in Oklahoma?
Well, they met as graduate students in Texas.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so they came over from China through Taiwan.
Separately?
Separately, yeah,
okay.
To be graduate students. And I guess at that time, you know, there were so few students from overseas that all the Chinese overseas students would know each other. So that's where they met in school in Texas.
What were they both studying independently? Your dad was a chemical engineer, you said?
My dad was a chemical engineer.
Okay.
My mom was studying library science.
Okay.
She has a background as a teacher as well.
Right. And did they speak the language when they arrived? Did they speak English when they came?
You know, they spoke some English, enough English to go to school. Actually, I never understood how it must have been like for them to come to another country until I myself went to France to work, and then struggled with doing all the daily things and getting understood and slowly learning the language. And it was then when I really appreciated how hard it must have been for them to come to a different country and study and figure out how to do all the things that they needed to do.
Did they ever talk about it?
Well, just growing up, you hear stories about what it was like, and I remember one story my mother told a couple of times. It was very hard to find hot sauce in those. I guess I guess in Texas that sounds kind of strange today, but back then, I think at least the part of Texas that they were in must have been not sort of more cut off from Mexico and the Latin culture, and she remembers just using a lot of black pepper.
A lot of black pepper?
To make up for the lack of any chili. So she tells stories like that about how they were adapting to the different foods and the different manners and ways of life.
Were they welcomed?
Oh, I think so, yeah. There was, they're certainly welcomed by the other Chinese students who were there, but my mom tells me the story of a host family that she was staying with when she first came to the United States. So there was, I think at that time, because foreign students were rarer, that there was a special effort to make sure that each one was noticed and looked after.
Right. So after Texas, they moved to metropolitan Oklahoma, and then to Kingston.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. In 1964. Is when they came to Kingston, bringing along a little baby in the
so you were the first
in the back seat. Yeah, I was the baby in the back seat, and my dad tells me that in those days, he just put a board with a blanket on top of it in the back seat, and that's where I was crawling around as they were driving.
As they drove?
Drove up, and then at the border there was just some wooden shack and a guy with a typewriter. So things were very different back then.
Holy mackerel! Is that ever interesting? They stayed in Kingston then, ever?
Yeah, they've been there. We've been there ever since. Yeah.
Okay. And did you have more siblings growing up?
Yeah, I have 2 younger brothers.
All right.
Yeah, one's a musician who lives in Toronto, and the other one's he's originally a mathematician, but now he's a management consulting guy who lives in Boston with his family. Yeah.
Isn't that something? And your mom, did she work once you were in Kingston?
She did. Yeah, she worked in the I believe it was the psychology library at Queen's University, and she volunteers. She's been volunteering a lot. Her life doing all sorts of things around the community, and
That's
so
terrific.
she's really involved and knows everybody.
Now, were you the kind of family that sat around the table and talked about current affairs, or were you an academic family? What do you remember growing up, your family being like?
I don't think we talk so much about current affairs. I mean, certainly watching the nightly news and reading the newspaper is something that we did a lot of, but we didn't sit down and have discussions about politics or anything really related to what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
It was a lot of family talk, like talking about, well, especially when we were kids, like, here's how you should table
Here's
manners.
how you should lead your life.
That's right. Here's how you should
That's
lead your
right.
life. Table manners. My dad used to always say, you have to eat everything on your plate and start with all the things you don't like and eat all
yes.
of those first.
Yes.
I just remember things like that. I don't remember any heavy discussions about politics and
That's okay.
current affairs.
That's a nice, normal childhood. That's my husband's rule, too. Eat everything you don't like first. And it helps me to understand what my husband hates about my cooking, too. But, I think that's a normal childhood for many, many Canadians.
Yeah.
So, you decided to, well, you were in an academic family, so there was probably a sense that you were going to attend university.
Mm-hmm.
Was there ever an idea in your head that you would not?
No, I think I was from a very young age very interested in science, and I remember astronomy was one of the things that I was really interested in when I was young, and because my father taught at the university, and it was, at least on my father's side especially, a rather academic family, and so it was. I did have this expectation that I would be going to university and pursuing academics. Yeah.
Did you think you'd become an academic yourself?
I did, especially when I got to in high school and really sort of dived into mathematics and science, and for a long time I was looking to work do research and teach and work in a university. That was something that I was looking forward to.
I suppose if it's been your entire upbringing too, where that's what surrounds you, right? I mean, you've got not just the community of being a child and having your friends and family and sports and whatever around you, but you've grown up in the larger academic community too, that it seems a natural fit. Were there specific things related to your dad's job as a professor that influenced your family? I mean, did you have students coming to stay for dinner? Or
Yeah, he would have some of his colleagues and some students, and certainly he would be talking a bit about what was going on at the university and some of the things that he would have to deal with. I remember he was for a bit of a stretch, he was the department head at chemical engineering, and he would talk about the sort of headaches that one has as an administrator. He talked to my mom about that, so I remember overhearing some of those conversations, and it was a bit of an academic milieu that we lived around, being so close to Queen's University.
Sure. You decided to study physics in the end.
Mm-hmm.
What was the impetus for that? I mean, was it just a passion? Was it something that you were good at and it was easy, so you decided to follow that?
It was something that it seemed like I was good at it and it was easy, but it was related to astronomy, which is and mathematics, which were two of the things that I was really interested in. And it had the ability. It was a field where you could try to do some exact things and try to predict things and create models that actually made predictions that you could go out and measure.
Okay.
So is
that a part of your personality? Do you like to be able to measure things and predict things that are?
I don't know if it's part of my personality, but it's certainly part of my upbringing and training that I like to think about, okay, well, how do we measure something to know it's really there?
Right.
How do we measure something so that we know the world is really what we think it is? And that's kind of related to how I approach my current job. I was thinking, well, people think that we should do this in some public policy area, And then one of my reactions is, well, how can we measure things so that we know we're actually making progress and making good use of the money that we're spending? So,
well, let's follow on that train of thought and skip ahead a little bit to your current role as an MP. There aren't a lot of people with a background in physics who are in Parliament now. And actually, I was listening recently to a discussion about whether it is helpful and whether it would be useful to have more scientists and engineers involved in politics, because they bring a different line of thinking.
yes.
But when you're at committee or when you're working with your colleagues, do you find that your background and that particular way of thinking is helpful to getting to a conclusion or to a consensus?
Well, I think it's good to have a really diverse range of people in any caucus or in any legislative body, and I think we do approach things from a different point of view. I think it's really great to have medical doctors who can bring that clinical background to inform public policy making. Certainly with my science background, I have a lot of personal ties that I can use to get information to help us know what's going on. And I also have a sense of what a research group, how that works. So what do graduate students do? What do postdoctoral researchers do? What is involved in writing a grant, and who fixes the equipment, things like that.
Yeah.
So I think that's very useful. But also, but there's a certain approach. There's a certain quantitative approach, and a certain systematic approach that people in the sciences and engineering, I think, would tend towards. I mean, it doesn't.
No matter what,
I wouldn't claim,
even if you're in the political field.
Yeah, even if you're in the political field, and I think there are a lot of important things that go on that are not so much in the public square because they're very detailed and they don't make great news stories, but they're nevertheless very, very important. And one of those very important things, I think, is looking at the budget. And there's complicated things in the budget, little changes in tax rules, and little changes in spending on research and development, which probably are never going to make the nightly news.
Right.
But they involve hundreds of millions of dollars of more spending or less spending, and they really do affect the economy. And ultimately, they affect people quite a bit. And so you have to, I think, have some parliamentarians who are really interested in that.
Right.
Like, I'm really interested in science policy or research and development tax credits. And it'll never make the news, but it's always bugged me that such and such a thing has not been done right, and I'm here to spend some time to try to contribute to making it better.
So is this current career, this political career, rewarding for you on that level, or is it frustrating? Do you find that Ottawa is a bureaucratic place where you run into obstacles? Well,
I think the bureaucracy is something that I certainly expected, and it's there for a good reason. But I do feel that I can contribute to the debate.
Yeah.
And I understand that I'm in the opposition, and it's a majority government, so you're not expecting to win any votes. But you can be there to point out what you think are problems, to point out improvements, and then to communicate that back to Canadians. And so it's all part of a debate and a discussion that you want to participate in and lead in a certain direction because of your own background or what your constituents are telling you.
Right.
So in that sense, I feel like I'm making a difference.
Yeah. Okay, let's take a step back again from your current role as a politician, as a member of Parliament, back to the fact that you studied physics and you did a PhD at Princeton.
Yes. In
physics, which is a pretty prestigious both institution to study at, but also degree to have. It's not art history. And I mean no insult to art historians, I have that degree. But you then took another career path. So instead of physics, you were in the banking sector.
Right.
How did that happen? Because that is not linear. At least it doesn't seem to me to be a linear type of progression.
Well, it was in the early 90s that I made that switch. And that time it was quite difficult to find permanent positions in academia. And I was trying to decide what to do next. And I talked to some of my friends who had made the move from being physicists to working mostly in the capital markets in banking. And there were a lot of interesting things that could be done in that area, using the mathematical and the modeling skills, all the quantitative skills that you have working in science. And I just kind of looked into it, and some of the things were very, very interesting. A lot of models and computing and dealing with real-life data and trying to figure out what all of it meant and modeling it to make sense of all the financial data. That was appealing to me, and the other advantage of working in the financial world is you get immediate feedback. So if you do something wrong, it's...
You mean immediate, like immediate that second?
Something in the business that you're working for, maybe not that second, but in the next week or two, something in the business will succeed or fail, and your work in research has some connection to that, or has some bearing on whether that thing fails or succeeds.
Right.
So that immediate feedback was another appealing aspect of that work.
And it sent you to different parts of the world, too.
Yeah, I worked in Philadelphia, and Paris, and Japan as well.
Yeah.
The other thing it did was eventually I got into management. When I was over in Japan, I managed a group, and that was a very different experience that I wasn't expecting to be involved in when I was still back in academia. And it was something that my academic background didn't prepare me for. So it was a real learning experience to learn how to run a business line and have 10 people reporting to me and be responsible for a bottom line and costs and revenue. So that was a real, I think, a good experience for me to learn all of that.
But maybe not enjoyable at the time.
No, it was enjoyable. It was enjoyable, and it was because it was a challenge, and you got immediate feedback for the effort that you put in. So it was enjoyable.
You met your wife while you were in Japan, is that correct?
Yes, we were both working in Japan. She was working as a teacher in an international school, and I was working for Morgan Stanley, and it's a global company in Japan.
How did you meet?
We met at a fundraiser at the Irish Embassy. It was a fundraiser.
Of course, it seems totally natural.
It's a fundraiser for Asian street children.
Okay.
Yeah. Is
she Irish?
Yeah, her name is Tara Sharkey, so she definitely has Irish in her background. It's Irish and Spanish American.
So where was she from?
Well, she's from California.
Oh, okay, that's a good place to be from.
Yeah.
Yeah. And did you then move back to California, or where did you go?
Well, we spent a few years in California. She went back to graduate school, and we had a young daughter, and I spent about 3 years at home with our daughter at that time.
Now, tell me about that discussion, because that must have been a really fascinating discussion to have. Here you have an influential position in a global firm, and she wants to go back to school. You have a young child together. What was the discussion like about how you're going to manage that balance? How did you become the stay-at-home dad?
Well, for me, it was a good time for a change. I think from having my nose to the grindstone and working the long hours at the bank. And we had a young child, and so it was a good time to take some time off to be with our little daughter.
You weren't reluctant?
No. We had been thinking about it for 2 years. It just seemed very natural to do because we got married and we had a daughter, and I had been working in the financial world for about 9 years. And my wife was looking at graduate schools, and it seemed very natural.
Because we continue to live in an environment where stay-at-home dads are a rarity. Mm-hmm. And it sometimes, I think for the most part that communities really gel around a stay-at-home dad, as we continue to be more of the mom stays at home society, but there is an increasing interest both on the part of mothers and fathers that the fathers stay home. But at the time, was your family and your network of friends, your community, were they supportive of you?
I would say so. Yeah. And
no one said, "You're crazy. What are you doing? You have this great salary, and you're."
No, I didn't get that.
That's great. That's really
in some
great.
sense, it was, there's it wasn't a totally unselfish choice, because I did get a break from a very demanding job,
yes.
but a well-paying job, and so we had some savings, and that helped a bit, and it was a good time for a change. So, it's. From a selfish point of view, there were some benefits too, but of course, it was lots of changes were occurring, getting married and having a kid, and it was a lot of fun to spend time with a little child,
and
as
to
well.
be really focused and able to focus on it. Yeah. Your daughter must have. She'll probably have very fond memories of that time, or no memory whatsoever.
Or no memory. Well, that's one of the sad things is you're playing with this 3-year-old, and you know that. When she grows up, she's not going to remember very much.
Yeah.
Exact. I mean, I think the impressions that you have stay with you for your whole life, but you don't remember the details. So that's a little bit sad.
Did you enjoy the time?
I did, and it was. I did take some time also to kind of step back and do some reading and research and.
In order to figure out where you wanted to go next, or
just
in general?
Just in general, because when I'm the type of guy in a job where I put the nose to the grindstone and I put the blinders on, and you don't pay a lot of attention to other things that you don't need to. But having a wife and a daughter kind of changes that a bit, and then getting away from that kind of job also gives you the time to do some of that reading and research. So when we had a babysitter come and spend a couple hours.
That's great.
A day, and then I would do some reading and just fooling around sometimes. That's
really terrific. Yeah.
So.
How did you get back to Kingston then?
Well, after my wife finished graduate school, we moved to Kingston. I was very, very fortunate that she was willing to do that.
Right. I'd say you were.
Yeah.
Leaving California and coming to Eastern Ontario.
Yeah, I guess so. Well,
a good wife.
A very good wife. So my parents still live in Kingston,
right.
and I have aunts and uncles there. And
so you had a natural support network.
Yeah, natural support network, and just people that I know, and knowing the place, and knowing that it was I think a very good place for kids to grow up in.
Yeah.
It's not too big, not too small, and there's
right.
a lot of opportunities. And but on the other hand, there isn't a whole lot of horrible traffic. I mean, people who live there think it's horrible.
Yes.
It's just they haven't lived in Toronto.
Exactly. You became a green advocate. Mm-hmm. How did that happen?
Well, that is, I guess, two things. One is I've always thought that it's important to think long term and to think about all the liabilities that we might be building up, the hidden liabilities. And I think that one way of approaching environmental protection is to think about all the benefits that the natural environment gives, that we need to grow our food and to breathe and drink clean water and have a livable environment. And to think about the sort of the hidden liabilities, the damage that's building up, and that we kind of put off, but that sooner or later somebody's going to have to pay for. Or maybe not pay for it directly, but they'll have fewer benefits from the environment. There would just be less space to live, less space to plant crops,
less clean air to breathe.
Less clean air to breathe, a more fragile environment, less diversity, less biodiversity. So an environment that's much more susceptible to damage. And a lot of things, even like, if you look at fish, eating fish, I think there's some pretty reliable studies that say if we don't do anything, then by 2050 we could lose all of our commercial fisheries. So things like that we kind of take for granted now, that are being damaged and that our kids and grandkids will have to pay for or not be able to benefit from.
Is that what precipitated the interest in politics? That
was one of the things that got me interested in politics. the time that I had when I was away from office work, I was able to do some reading and look at some of the other long-term liabilities. So some of the fiscal, the hidden, infrastructure deficit that we have in Canada, and the debts that we're building, not so much in Canada, but more in the United States, the government debt that was building up, some of the looming costs of things like climate change and the demographic shifts. So we have an aging population, we have rising healthcare costs. So all of these things kind of look to me like dark clouds in the horizon. And the way I thought about it was, well, I have my kids here, and I'm reading to them and feeding them and putting them to bed and playing with them. But there's a lot of things that they will have to face in their lives having to do with those dark clouds in the horizon that somebody should be, or a lot of people should be thinking about and trying to take care of. So that's kind of how I looked at it.
Decided to do something rather than just thinking.
So that's how I got involved in thinking about public policy. The actual trigger to get involved in sort of more partisan things is that in 2006 the Liberal Party had a leadership race, which was a very wide open leadership race. And so then because of that there were a lot of spots for people to say, oh, I want to help out, and okay, you can take care of trying to call people in Kingston and the islands.
Okay.
So there were a lot of spots to sort of get involved, and that's when I first got involved in the Liberal Party, and now I'm very involved in the Liberal Party.
Yes, you are, as an MP. Yeah. To take a step away from the political aspect of the work that you're now involved in, the public policy aspect, into the more personal elements of your life, as a dad, as a husband, but you're very busy. You obviously still like to read and to be active in learning more about either the dark clouds or the silver linings as well, I'm sure. But what do you do in your spare time? I understood you were a chess player, pretty good chess player.
That was a long time ago.
And you don't play anymore?
And I haven't had time for a while. I think when if I have spare time, it should be spend some time with my wife and my kids, and I think that's a priority, is to figure out what they need and to make sure that any spare time I have is for them. And do you get that spare time when you're home in the riding? Because I make it. Okay, and when you're here in Ottawa, do you go? You're only a couple hours away. I'm only a couple hours away. I mean, I don't commute. But you stay in Ottawa. I stay in Ottawa because the 2-hour commute is a little bit too long. Yeah. So I just try to get a lot of work done when I'm here, so that I have a little bit of extra flexibility on the weekends. And when you go home on the weekends, you have to go to some events too. Yeah. But the way I figure it, the more work I can get done here in Ottawa, the more flexibility I'll have back in the riding to make some free time on the weekends. Apparently your grandmother ran for municipal council in Taiwan. So maybe you're just following in a long line of political activists that you didn't know about. Just that one. That one grandmother who was very adventurous. Well, apparently you are too. And I thank you very much for taking the time to be here today. It's been very pleasant to get to know you and to learn a bit more about you. Thank you. It's been great to talk to you too.